The king had so commanded concerning him. So this was a command that the king made. The king said, when Haman comes in, you bow to him and you do this reverence, because the king had promoted him. But look what it says at the end of the verse. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. He would not bow to this man. He would not reverence this man. It doesn't give us a lot of insight on why that was. It does tell us, as we read on, it says, Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said to Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? So the servants asked him, Why are you doing this? It doesn't give us the answer, but he obviously gave them an answer. Look at verse 4. Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, every day this would happen. And they would say, Mordecai, why are you doing this? Why are you breaking the law? Transgressing. That's what it means, to break this law. Why are you transgressing this? Why are you breaking this law? Why won't you bow to Haman? Why won't you do him reverence? And so when they asked him day by day, and he hearkened not unto them, they told Haman. They said, well, he won't listen to us. We're going to tell on him. So we have a bunch of tattletales here. And they go and tell Haman. Look at Haman's wonderful response. To see whether Mordecai's matter would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. That is the only insight that we get on why Mordecai might not be reverencing Haman. I personally believe that Mordecai was abiding by something he was taught as a child. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength. And as a child he was taught, thou shalt have no other gods before him. And he was taught not to bow or reverence any man as he would bow and reverence God. And I think he explained to these men that he was a Jew. And as a Jew, he bowed only to God. And so that's the only insight we have. There might be other reasons. It might be political. It might be personal. Haman's not a good guy. We're going to learn about that real fast. Haman is not a good guy. And maybe Mordecai I just saw, this is not a good guy. This is not the kind of guy anybody should bow down to. And the king's got the wool over his eyes. The king's obviously a weak man. We've talked about that. And so he's put this man into position. But he would not bow to him. So, verse 5, And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then Haman was full of wrath. He was full of wrath. Verse 6, And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone. He thought scorn. He did not like the idea of just hurting Mordecai alone. This is where we get a glimpse into the black heart of Haman. He didn't just want to go up to Mordecai and throw him against the wall and say, this is the law, you bow, you obey. That wasn't good enough for Haman. Look at what it says. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. Back up just another statement. For they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, and that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. So these servants tattletale on Mordecai and say, Mordecai won't bow down to you, and he won't do reverence to you. We tell him every single day that he should, but he won't. And they were trying to pat themselves on the back and say, Haman, we're telling you because he won't do it. And we told him to do it, but he won't do it. And he's a Jew, and he won't do it because he's a Jew. And Haman wasn't good enough just to hurt Mordecai or even put him to death for not obeying the rule, the law. He found out he was a Jew, and he said they all got to die. He hated them all and wanted to kill them all because of this. Daily, Mordecai refused to bow. Daily, he was inquired about this. Eventually, Haman is told, and Haman sees, and obviously Mordecai now knows that Haman is very, very displeased. He was full of wrath. And we'll see in weeks to come his plot to kill all the Jews. But we learn a lot about Mordecai here. He is a man of conviction and a man of courage. So we see that he was a man who cared for Esther and a man of compassion. We see that he is a man that is a loyal and faithful servant. We see that he is a man of courage and a man of conviction every day. Listen, when the plot was uncovered, he didn't have to do anything. He was risking himself to uncover that plot. Yet that was the right thing to do, and that's what he did. He was a man of courage. When he was told to bow, he would not bow. And I think it's important that every day he was pressed on that. Every day he was pressured to go back on that. He made a stand. I'm not bowing to this man. I believe it was for religious reasons. I don't know that for sure, but I believe it was because he was a Jew and he would not bow to this man. And he took a stand. And every day he was pressured on that. Every day he was asked about that. He was questioned about that. It said daily they would do that, and yet he did not bow. He's a man of courage and conviction. Most importantly, though, he was a man that was being led by God. He was a man that was being led by God. All that's going on, from the fact that he was taken into captivity to start with, God allowed that captivity to take place, and God allowed Mordecai to go into that captivity. He could have been killed in some of the battles or any of those kind of things, but God allowed him to go into that captivity. God allowed him to go into the palace. God allowed him to sit at the king's gate. God allowed him to overhear or be aware of the plot to kill the king. God allowed him to save the king's life. God allowed him to take this stand. God is moving in all of this. It's so amazing. You're seeing God begin to set the scene. It's like the chessboard, and He's getting the pieces in position. He's not ready for checkmate yet, but He's starting to make His moves. Esther's now queen. Mordecai is in the king's gate, and he's uncovered this plot, and then everybody seems to have forgotten about it. Haman is now furious with him. The servants have already told on him. The pieces are beginning to come into place as God moves. I'm telling you, it's the most beautiful thing in this book. The fact that God's name is never mentioned, and yet you constantly just see Him moving and see Him working. It's so important that we learn to see that in our own lives. Do you know most people would look at this story and they say, oh, this is all coincidence. That's what people like to say. This just happened. It just happened that Vashti angered the king. It just happened that he had this party and got drunk and wanted to show her beauty, and she angered the king and he got rid of her. And it just so happened that Esther was chosen to go into this competition, and it just so happened that she was favored by the guy that was in charge of the women. And it just so happened that the king loved her above all other women. It just so happened that it just so happened that her parents died. Mordecai became her father to her. All this just happened, right? It gets to the point in this story where there's no way. I mean, the hardest atheist could not read this story with any kind of belief and say that God didn't do it. I mean, you'll see all the pieces come together at the end of the story. Even the little things. I love it. I love it. Even the little things. They forgot to reward Mordecai. But it mentions here, just tuck it away in your mind, it mentions that it was written down. It's just all these circumstances are just working out. But God is that move. You got to learn to see that in your own life. Listen, there is no such thing as coincidence in the life of a believer. We believe in God. And we believe in a God who loves us and who is involved in our lives. He's not just an old man up on a porch in heaven with his arms crossed and he got this whole thing started and now he's done with it. That's not the God I know. That's not the God of the Bible. He is involved in our lives. He's working in our lives. Let me tell you something. He has a plan for you. He's got a will for your life. He's got things He wants you to accomplish. And these things just happen. Just little by little, event by event, circumstance by circumstance, coincidence by coincidence. God is setting the board up and He's putting you in position for things to happen. What's amazing is how often what seems like such a tragedy in our life, God turns it. I haven't been through a lot of very difficult things in my life. I'm still pretty young. I like to tell myself I'm young, 36. So I'm still pretty young. I haven't been through a whole lot of difficult things, but I remember probably the lowest point in my life. man, suddenly I got a wife and a kid, and I've been serving God, and suddenly I am without a job. And I mean, it is December 1 was my last paycheck, and I had no idea where the next one was coming from, and I was desperate. You know, I was filling out applications everywhere. I'd do anything. I didn't care. I had to support my family, but to see the way God moved and all that, the way He opened up doors, and you know, I was working 3 jobs at a point, but then this one little, you know, my wife put my resume on a website, and the guy sees my resume and just so happened to connect with a few of the things on there that really made no sense at all. I asked him, why in the world did you hire me? And he was just like, oh, this and this and this, but it made no sense. I had no skills for what he wanted to do. I mean, I was not educated for that. I was not trained for that. I had 0 experience in the field, and yet he was just like, yeah, I like you. And he hires me, and the way that God has just worked all these things out, and I have seen God use the job that I'm at in just really awesome ways. You know, one day my boss was just talking with me. For the longest time, it was just me and him working in the warehouse. You know, he's the owner, started the company, and we're packing orders together, and we would talk, and he says, what's your 5-year plan? And I said, I have no idea. It's like 12 months ago, I was working 3 jobs. You know, I was serving in the church, and then that fell apart, and I got 3 jobs. And I mean, if you asked me 12 months ago what was my 5-year plan, this wasn't part of it. I had this wasn't even on the scene, so I don't know about that. I said, but I can tell you, I love God, I love my church. You know, no matter what I'm doing, I want to be involved in my church. I want to give towards my church, and I want to help other people go to the mission field and those kind of things. And he took that and he kind of tucked it away. And later on he said, I want to help you do that. It's like the company's doing well, I want to help you do that. So I'm going to give you some money every month that you can donate to whatever you want to donate. I mean, I could see God just moving. And I've had friends that are on the mission field and they're saying, hey, I need money for a church. And I am able to say, hey, I'm going to give some money towards that. And it's not my money. I love that. That's great. I love giving away somebody else's money. That's fun right there. You want to have fun? Give away somebody else's money for God. That's good stuff. All right, that's like my dream job now. I want to have a charitable foundation where I can just give money away for God, someone else's money. But I mean, I can just see God working in all these things. It's amazing. I mean, I have no idea. If you ask me, how in the world did you get here? So I'm running this company. I'm able to hire guys from church that are my friends, that love God and needed a good job, and I'm able to give them a good job. And now we have a few lost people on our staff, and they're able to witness to them every single day. I hear them witnessing to them, and God is just working. I don't believe that this young man, Andy, came into our church for no reason. I mean, into my workplace for no reason at all. I think God was moving him there because he needs to get saved. And you see God working, and he's blessed, and he's taking care of me all along the way. And when I look back at it, I was so scared, and I felt like I was so in the dark, and I had no idea what was going on. But you know what God was doing? He was just moving me on the right place on the board because He's got plans for me. Never forget that. At no point in your life, no matter how dark, no matter how down you are, never forget that God's still got a plan for you. And He's still moving. He's still working. Man, there's so many stories we could tell about that. You know, the great hymn writer, Fanny Crosby, she was asked later in life, would you go back and change it? If they came up with a cure so that you could see. And, she said so many beautiful things in that. But, she said, no, I wouldn't change it now because I want the first thing that I see to be my Savior's face. I think that's just awesome. But she said, no, I thank God for that doctor that blinded me. He made a mistake and he blinded her. And he said, I thank God for that because through that it drew me closer to God. I could see things that I could never have seen if I could see. And she was able, and the beauty of what she wrote was because she had that relationship with God. She saw things we couldn't see because we saw everything else. And she was able to thank God for that. It's just God moving and working. It's an amazing thing. We see that in the life of Esther. We see that in the life of Mordecai. We'll see that all through this book. You're going to love it. I'm telling you. Read the book, cheat, go ahead. Y'all have heard it, but read it again. Read it again. And when you read it, just look for God's hand moving. It's awesome. It's so good. It's so good to see. And at the end of the day, I'll go ahead and spoil it for you. God wins. And let me tell you the truth in your life too. I'll spoil it for you. At the end of the day, God wins. And the beautiful thing is if we're willing and if we'll follow Him, we get to be a big part of it. And that's awesome. So, we got to meet Mordecai. Next week we're going to start looking at Haman. He's a good one. We're gonna get us some theme music for him. Just real evil sounding. I mean, yeah. He's one of the worst villains. I mean, when you think through the Bible, there's some bad ones, Ahab and Jezebel, and there's some bad people in the Bible. You know that person that whatever her name is gets mad and gets John the Baptist's head cut off. I mean, that's evil. There's some evil. Haman is evil. He's pretty awful evil. When you start thinking historically about some of the worst people that ever lived, his name should come to mind. He's evil. We'll look at him next week. Let's pray together. God, we love you. We thank you so much for your goodness to us. So we thank you for a chance to study your word again. Just go through it verse by verse, learning and growing. Lord, we pray that you'll help us to take some of these things we learned about Mordecai and apply them to our own life. Help us to be people of compassion and care. Even if it's not our duty, even if it's not our job to take care of somebody or care for somebody or help somebody, help us to have the heart of Christ and just serve and love just like you would. Help us to be people of courage and conviction. Help us to take a stand. And even if people badger us about it every single day, help us to have the conviction to take a stand and stay right. I pray that you'll help us to be like Mordecai and not bow down. There's a lot of things that are craving our heart in this world. There's a lot of things that want our attention, want our affection, but nothing deserves it like you do. Help us to take that stand. But Lord, most of all, help us just to see you working in our lives. God, we know you are. We know you have a will for us. We know you have a plan for us. Help us to see your hand. Help us to always be led by your hand. Help us to be willing servants of you, just like Mordecai and Esther. Then help us at the end of the day to give you all the glory. It'd be so silly when we see what God did, when we see what you did through all this story. It'd be so silly if Mordecai and Esther took any credit, patted themselves on the back, gave themselves a medal. It wasn't them. We know it was you as you worked. And help us to do the same, God. Help us to give you all the glory at the end of the day. We love you. We ask all this in your name. Amen.